Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose.
How you doing this morning, Jared?
Fantastic, Mr. Ali. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing terrific too, man. Living hard. Got Ramadan and my 75 hard challenge going simultaneously right now. I'm loving it.
How's that feeling?
It's hard. it's tough. I'm hungry. The other day, man, I really was like, I need to break my fast. And I was in my head, I was like, I need to eat something. I need to break my fast. I got too much going on. But I was able to push through it and make it to sundown.
And now I can't remember, coffee or no coffee?
Nothing. No water, no coffee, no food,
So
no smoke.
Sun up to sundown, nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, it's about 4:30 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah, that's good though. I was actually watching a thing about the importance of fasting the other day and just how it's designed to, for a lot of people, it's just an intestinal fortitude, like to see how tough you are. Will you sacrifice things? Because life, quite honestly, even, for all of us right now, even depending on where you're at socioeconomically, but almost everybody has excess of whatever they need right away. They don't have to wait for anything. And sometimes we lose that patience of working towards something and earning it.
Yeah, it's easy to get comfortable.
It is, man. Yeah, speaking of comfortable, what did you think of Miss Margot?
Oh, loved it, man. She is the epitome of getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Doing things to be your most authentic version. And I think that we can all learn something from watching the content that she puts out. She's definitely authentic.
Yeah, I loved it. And like we shared in the show with her, is I wasn't sure when you first said, hey, she's going to come on. I watched her Instagram. I'm like, okay, these crazy dances. What is this? But you're absolutely right. Afterwards, now I check it and I just sit there and laugh, because she is truly herself, which is very freeing. And I think, honestly, if more of us could just be comfortable being completely ourselves, it'd be a much happier world.
I agree. Yeah, it was definitely a pleasure having her on, and always a pleasure watching her content, man. She makes me laugh too.
She does. I just watched one the other day where she runs out into the ocean and she's just doing her dancing and running around, and all these other people on the beach are just staring at her, and I thought it was awesome.
The T-Rex, Lady Rex.
Oh, yes. So today we get to go back down memory lane a little bit, Ali.
Yeah, man. A good friend of mine from high school, Lainy Carta, which I knew her as Lainy Loyola, will be speaking with today. And I'm really excited, man, because she has a very inspirational story. And I remember being inspired by her in high school by one of her experiences that she'll tell us more about today. She got to speak in front of our entire high school, and it's Texas. We come from a big school, so it was a lot of people that she had to speak in front of, and really owning her story that I think our listeners are going to be able to learn from.
I love it. What are the odds that we get a good Arabian cowboy high school story?
Ooh, I don't know, man. I don't know. I think we just need to focus on Lainy for this one.
All right, my friend. You ready to bring her on?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, On Purpose community, I am very excited for our guest today. She's actually a good friend of mine from high school, from back in Texas, Miss Lainy Carta, although I knew her as Lainy Loyola. Lainy is a master's in science. She is a speech language pathologist, public speaker, and aspiring author. She's also a loving daughter, loving wife, and loving dog mom, and has a very powerful and purposeful story to share with us today. So, community, help me welcome Miss Lainy Carta. How you doing this morning, Lainy?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show with us. It's a pleasure to have you, and we are super pumped at some point to hear a high school story about the Arabian cowboy. That's his.
I don't know if we need to go there. The
Not,
focus is on Lainy today.
no, not for this show. We might have to do a second one, Lainy, where you just come and it's all outtakes of Ollie's life.
All right, bring back the memories. Of
Oh,
high
man.
school and-
Oh, we would love it. Well, we're honored to have you here, and it's a privilege for us to be able to share your story with our community. But
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're ready. We're ready. But before we get going too deep into things, we got to warm you up, right? Like a morning warm up here. So we got a couple tough questions for you to get your mind focused. So the first question, Lainy, you get one food for the rest of your life. What are you eating?
Ooh, one food for the rest of my life. I feel like I would go with pasta. I eat a lot of pasta. I'm also married to an Italian, so that worked out really well. But I could probably eat it every single day.
Nice. I don't think we've heard pasta yet, huh, Jared?
No pasta. Red sauce or white sauce?
I like red. My husband's more of a white, but I'm definitely more of a red tomato basil kind of sauce.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, there's so many options with Italian too.
Yeah, and there's just different ways. Like when I say pasta, I even think about like pad thai, like noodles, like just any form of like noodles. I love.
All right, versatile choice. Very good, Lainy. Second question, Lainy, is if you could be any superhero, real superhero or made up like Super Lainy, and have any superpower, who would you be and what would your power be?
Ooh, that is a tough one. It's funny because we actually just got through like the Avengers. We did like a whole binge watching it in order. So I feel like I would go with Black Widow.
Ooh.
I love her. She's super intelligent. She's like very strong. And it's actually funny because I feel like I keep bringing my husband into this, but his free pass is Scarlett Johansson. So she's beautiful, and I'm like, I don't know if that's something to share with on the podcast, but she's beautiful, intelligent, and smart. So I definitely feel like I would go with Black Widow.
Nice.
She's definitely popular amongst the young ladies nowadays.
Have y'all had someone say that yet? Black Widow?
Nope.
No.
I'm hitting all the firsts here.
Yeah.
Double first. Nice.
That's good. All right, Lainy, what book are you currently reading?
Ooh, I just started a new one. Untamed by Glennon Doyle. I think it just released this year. And it's so good. So far, so good. I just started it like 2 days ago.
Fiction or nonfiction?
It is fiction, nonfiction.
I feel like I've heard it. Ollie, what do you know about
It's really
that?
popular right now.
I feel like I saw that title pop up in my recommended on Audible recently, but I have not checked that out.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Cool.
I feel like it's probably hitting a lot more females though.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Nice. All right, well, how you feeling? You warmed up?
I think so.
Yeah, see, it's nice and easy. That's how we do it. Laid back. All right. Lainy, one of the things we really like to do is help our audience connect with our guest, is share stories about how we kind of got into our life of purpose. And for many of us, it's an incident or a point in time where we learned something that really shaped where our life goes. Can you share with us, how did you find your purpose and what took place in life to put you on this path?
Sure. I've actually had two pretty traumatic events happen to me at a very young age. When I was 16, I was in a car accident, a drinking and driving related car accident that I suffered a spinal cord injury. And that really rocked my world. There was, not in a good way. There was just a lot of hard conversations I had to have. There were relationships that I thought were gonna be there for me for the rest of my life, and they weren't. And then there were people that I did not expect to be there for me, that really stepped up to the plate. And I still maintain those relationships. Um, I think for me, it was probably a year or two after that that I kind of decided like who I wanted to be, what career choices I wanted to make, what I was looking for in relationships, whether that be, friendships or romantic relationships. So that was like a huge turning point for me, probably about a year out when I realized things weren't changing. This wasn't really a recovery for me. It was more of an adaptation to my injury. Um, and then when I started kind of figuring out my career path and I felt like things were smooth sailing about 4 years after. This is a hard one to talk about. Um, my parents were on an anniversary trip. And Ollie, I don't think I've even talked to you about this quite yet. But my parents were on an anniversary trip in September of 2012.
Okay.
And I was studying for midterms, and my mom called me and she was like, well, I'm going to back up a second. So on the Sunday night, my dad had called me and was like, "Hey, we're going to be camping in national park, and I just want to let you know I'm going to call you tomorrow on an emergency line just in case if anything happens to you or your brother, you can reach out to us on this emergency line." And I was like, "Oh, okay, great. Like, I need to study for finals. Like, thanks for letting me know." And then the next Monday, the very next day, I got a call from a random number, and I was like in the middle of studying. So I was like, "Oh, it's my dad calling on that emergency number. I'm gonna let it go to voicemail just so he can say like, oh, this is the number. If you need me, call me." Because when I'm in my like focus mode, I'm like, don't bother me. So I didn't answer. And for some really weird reason, I had like this like pit in my stomach, like I need to check that voicemail. So I did, and it was my mom, and she was crying. And she was like, "Hey, I need you to," sorry, I get emotional talking about this. "Hey, I need you to call me back. Something happened." And I immediately went into panic mode, called my mom back, and she had told me like we were hiking, and your dad wasn't feeling very good, so he went to go rest on the floor and used his backpack as a pillow. And he had a heart attack. Something happened. I was like, "Okay, great, like whatever. Tell me he's okay. He's in the hospital. He's stable." And she couldn't even talk to me. She had to hand the phone to a park ranger. And she's like, "I can't, this is hard for me. I can't tell you." And immediately I knew my dad had passed away from a heart attack. Um, it was sudden, they're on their anniversary trip, and it was probably the worst moment of my life. A lot of people think it was the day I was told I would never walk again, but it was the day that my mom called me bawling, crying about my dad, saying he's not coming home. So that for me was a huge turning point because my dad was kind of the breadwinner in the family. So it was like I went into panic mode about college funds and things like that, and I knew like whatever I did, I needed to finish my business in college, and kind of close that chapter out. So I think those two moments of trauma were just really big turning points in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having the vulnerability and the courage to share that. I know a couple of times you said that it's difficult to share, but again, sharing your story can really give meaning and purpose to others. So, tell us, Lainy, after that second traumatic experience of your father passing away, where did you find the courage and the strength to continue to move forward, and tell us a little bit about where you found that strength and courage, and then how it led you to finding purpose in your life.
Yeah, that was a hard one for me because my brother and my mom were both they were very open about their emotions, and they would, cry to me a lot, and I felt like I needed to be the strong one for a really long time. So I wouldn't show emotion, I wouldn't cry, and I wouldn't even talk about it for a long time. And I don't know if that was just my way of avoiding the feelings that, that were there. So it was probably maybe like a year or two after that I really dug deep into my feelings, and I was like, "Hey, it's okay to feel this. Like it's okay to feel that pain and move forward, and grieve about it." Cause I think for the longest time I didn't want to feel it because I just didn't want to believe it was there or that it had happened. I actually remember my mom at one point getting like frustrated with me, like, "Why are you pretending you're so strong? Like, it's okay to be sad about it, because she was just crying to me and talking so much about it, and I was like, I don't feel like I'm ready. So maybe about a year or two after, I think it was actually when I met my husband, because he unfortunately didn't get a chance to meet my father, which killed me. And he was like, kind of kept bringing it up, like, I want you to talk about him. I want you to, I want to know who he was. And so he really did a good job kind of like letting me open up my feelings for that grief and that loss. So I think kind of in those moments is when I moved forward from it and just kind of rose above it.
Yeah, that's powerful. Lainy, I would like to know, you said something that really sparked interest in me. And um, going back to the car crash, you said there was a
Mhm.
moment when you realized this wasn't a recovery. It was I think you might have said an adaptation, maybe.
Yes.
What led to that, and how did you make that shift mentally? Because I think a lot of our community, whether it's a car crash or just obstacles in life, sometimes we don't know that that's time to change our mindset towards it, right? Like there's some things that are going to be, and we got to figure out how do we adapt and use this to our advantage instead of looking at it as a crutch or a reason why we're not going to be able to do different things. And so I found that wording very, very inspiring, right? Like we're trying to recover, and now we got to adapt.
Right.
How did you process that, and share with me some of the internal thoughts you had as you moved from recovery to adaptation?
Yeah, that was really hard, because I think as a 16-year-old, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna overcome this. I'm gonna be that person that walks out of the hospital. And I wanted to be, and like I think a part of me will always hope for recovery. But about it was somewhere in that first year that I was like, I was relying on a lot of people for help, like whether that be like transfers into the car or like transfers into the shower and things like that. My mom's actually an RN, so she was, it was very helpful having her from the medical field. But I do remember like a specific moment being in my bathroom and like waiting for my mom to like help transfer me into the shower chair. And I was like, you know what, this isn't changing. Like, why do I need to wait and rely on her? So she was upstairs on the phone or something, and I was like, this that was kind of the moment that I'm like, you know what, I need to figure this out. I need to problem solve. I need to figure out how I can make this work for myself, because my mom's not going to take care of me for the rest of my life. I'm not going to allow that. So it was like the moment of me learning how to like get from my wheelchair into the shower chair. And then my mom had come down and she saw I had done everything by myself, like with no help. And I was like, I know that's like it sounds so small, but like when you
Wow.
are going through a spinal cord injury, every little thing is a huge celebration. So my mom, I remember she came around the corner and like saw me in my shower chair, and she had tears in her eyes, like, oh my gosh, maybe she won't have to rely on me for the rest of my life, or her life. Because both of our lives.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was kind of the turning moment. Like, okay, these little victories are going to be my way of kind of, in a way recovering, but more internally than um, a physical recovery. So I think that was my moment.
I love it. That's taking back some of your power, right? Like looking at, okay, it may not be the way it was, but it doesn't mean that I've given up all of my power.
Right. And
Eh,
I think that was kind of like the first stepping stone that I
mhm.
was like, okay, if this is something I can do by myself, like what else can I do? And then I said, I
Yes.
want to get my driver's license. And, I think it was less than a year that I went to get my driver's license with hand controls and learn how to get in and out of my car and take apart my wheelchair. So that just kind of set the stage for like what I wanted of my life.
No, I love it. And I think that's a great analogy for our listeners is it's that first step. And once we start getting in motion, then we start seeing what's possible. When we stay where we are, a lot of times we see what's impossible or what our limits are. And
Exactly.
by pushing forward, now all of a sudden we start being curious about other things. I love that. And I can only imagine um, the power you felt again,
Yeah. I
doing
think, and
something for
when I saw my
yourself.
mom's face with like tears in her eyes, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I can do this. Like let's keep pushing forward."
Did you say anything to her like, "Quit crying, mom, I'm gonna keep doing more of this," or anything like that?
No, it was just like almost like a moment of silence that it was such a great feeling that like, oh my gosh, like I felt like I had let my mom down and just like being involved with the drinking and driving car accident and then just like having her see her, physically able daughter just completely wheelchair bound. And I think I just felt like such a failure as a daughter. And so when I was able to kind of see those moments where she was like proud of like little things like that, I was like, okay, let's fix this relationship. Let's move forward. And I don't know, that shower moment was definitely one of those, or the first one.
Yeah, that's amazing, Lainey. I remember seeing you after your accident and how you were still so full of life and continued to live your life and be this bright person in the world. And I admired that. I was inspired by you and looked up to you. Quick funny story. I actually remember this moment where I felt so dumb and you were like an inspiration to me because we were at this party and I forgot whose house. I think it was this girl I went to high school with named Megan's house. And I had lost a beer pong game. And I got so frustrated and upset about it because I was super competitive at beer pong. And I remember like storming out and I was pissed and I was in my truck and I thought about how you were so poised, so grateful, so bright all the time. And even after your accident, I felt like I never saw you complain. I never saw you feel sorry for yourself, and that you just continued to live your life and execute on your goals. And I remember that moment of being like, man, I need to be more like Lainey, man. She doesn't ever complain about anything. She's
Oh.
always just getting after it. So it's amazing to hear that nothing has slowed you down and that you're continuing to execute on your goals. So I wanted to ask, from that time, that was a pretty quick event, right? You were 16, then you said 2012. So that was what, like
Mhm. It
four,
was 4 years. Yeah.
4 years, 4 years. And then you had, your father passing away, which you said was even more traumatic than your spinal injury. Did you feel after those 4 years, um, were you at a point to where you felt confident and in control of your life and your life's path and journey, and then that happened? Or kind of tell us where you were at that point.
Yeah, I think so. Like that first year after high school, or I guess I went back. My car accident happened junior year, and then I went back to school my senior year in a wheelchair, which was hard. And then I slowly started to find my rhythm because I was told I would never go to college. So I was like, I'll choose a path that requires 2 degrees so I can, show you guys, yes, it's gonna happen. But I I was definitely finding my rhythm. I was at college and I don't know, I feel like my mom and my relationship had really come a long way, and me and my dad have always had a good relationship. So I definitely was on that path that I was just like, yes, finally, and figured it out. Like nothing can stop me, and it literally like was like all over again a cycle. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's funny because I remember when my brother, my mom, and I had met at the house like right after it happened. My mom was just crying, like, I feel like terrible things just keep happening to us, like the Kennedys. And she was like, I don't understand like why we keep getting hit hard with all of these things. So I definitely feel like I was like on a path going up, and then it was just like completely rocked by that.
Hmm. Yeah, I like a quote. We had a pastor on recently, and I'm not sure if he said this, but I like a quote that says God gives his toughest battles to his best angels sometimes. And I think that's your story is a great example of, we really grow through adversity, through pain, through trauma. I mean, it's one of our only choices. We can grow or wither away. And it's amazing to see that you had two very difficult experiences that most people may not ever deal with in their life, especially at a young age, passing away of a parent, a spinal cord injury that leaves you with limited sensation. and to see you continue. And some people may not even get a college degree, and you went ahead and did that, and now living your purpose, public speaking, inspiring others. So now tell us a little bit about, after this, what are you doing today to share your story, to share your purpose, and empower others? Because it's a powerful story that you have to share.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going so many different directions with it. So like I chose my career path because of my spinal cord injury. Because when I was first injured, I was having to go through months of physical therapy and occupational therapy. And I would always see on the side a room that said speech therapy. And I was like, what is that? Like, why am I not going there? So I had asked about it, and they were like, well, some people, suffer brain injury and it impacts their way to communicate with people. And I was just like blown away by that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I lost the ability to use my legs. But I can't imagine a life without being able to communicate. So that was when I was kind of introduced into the field. And then my dad was a doctor, and he worked with a speech language pathologist who kind of, she was willing to speak to me about it. And I was just like intrigued, like, yes, this is what I want to do. I feel like I was meant to do that. I always thought I wanted to work with adults, and I think later on I will, with traumatic events such as like a brain injury or stroke, overcoming and adapting. Right now I'm with kids, and I think it's where I need to be because, they make me laugh, and they're very honest. And I think for me, a huge thing is just like educating young minds on, like, you can do anything you want no matter your circumstances, because when they meet me, they're like blown away by the wheelchair, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, why are you in a wheelchair? Like, how do you get in your car? Like, how do you do all this? And for me, it's like a huge teachable moment. And it's actually funny, one of my kids told me, just from like working with me, he is so educated on handicap parking now. And he's like, Miss Lainy, I saw someone park in the handicap parking that probably shouldn't have been parked there. And even when he went on a trip to like Phoenix or something, he notices everything. He noticed that like the swimming pool had like a lift chair for someone to be able to get in and out of the water that needs it. And he was like, Miss Lainy, if you went to the hotel I stayed at, like, you would be able to get in and out of the water. And I was like, dang, like, I didn't realize I was making such a huge impact on like little minds, and just being, educated and aware of, the disability and, handicap parking and things like that. And I was like, that's pretty cool. So I think in that sense, I am definitely educating little minds about just, inclusion. In another sense, I've done public speaking about drinking and driving. I'm very, very transparent when I go on stage and I talk about, I was drinking. I was not the driver, but, I definitely got in the car and I was, surrounded by partying. So I'm very transparent about that. I'm trying to think what else. And then my relationship with my mom, I talk about that a lot because I think the car accident really put a lot of pressure and strain on our relationship. But later on, it did end up bringing us closer than we've ever been. So my long-term goal is to write a book with my mom, just kind of comparing the way that our perception of what we saw different events, how we saw different events.
Nice.
So, my perception of the night of the accident, her perception getting that phone call from, the police officer, and like those emotions. And then my perception of like recovery and just going to college and things like that. So there's a lot of different directions I'm choosing to go with my purpose.
I love it. And when do you have a couple like moments or thoughts when you decided that you were going to embrace your story and share it with the world instead of, because a lot of people will go through life thinking their story is not worth sharing. And what we're always trying to promote is we all have stories that need to be shared. And quite honestly, somebody out there is waiting for your story. But if you don't share it, they'll never hear it. So do you have a couple ideas or tips that you work through getting comfortable sharing all of your stories?
For me, I think the biggest thing was being able to talk about my dad. I talk about my car accident very transparently and open. My dad, it's not as easy for me. So I think kind of working through those moments of being able to talk through it out loud. And then you hear like a lot of people that you might not even be aware of that are going through similar feelings and emotions. And they'll step up like, hey, this is how I got through it. This is how I worked through it. So the more I talked about those difficult feelings and just having those hard conversations with people, um, the more I realize there's other people that are really, they're hurting and they might be able to take something away from your story. Um, so I think my biggest tip would just be to be vulnerable and talk about it. Not, don't talk people's ears off, but just definitely like when it comes up and people are really interested in it, like don't be afraid to share your feelings and thoughts about it.
And do you think part of the transition, because these are two big incidents happening in a very short time in your life, and one where you're kind of dependent upon everybody else after your car crash and just listening to your story, the next one you're kind of the one that everybody's coming to and they're leaning on you. Do you think one kind of prepared you for the second one? Did you learn any transferable skills there? Do you see any similarities in how you handled that?
Yes and no. For me, they were both very different and a different kind of hard to overcome. I think the one thing that I saw in common between the two were the community that came together. Because my friends after my car accident, Ollie, you can definitely probably speak to this. They were my backbone whenever my backbone broke because I didn't want to go back to school. I didn't want to do a lot. Like I had a really negative mindset at first, like in the hospital, and all my friends were like, "Hell no! Like you are going back to school. Like, we have your back in this." So they really pushed me through it and got me through that first one. And they were there for the second one too. The same group of friends. I have a really strong group of girlfriends that have got me through everything. So when I called them right after I found out about my dad, and it's funny because we were in college at the time, so we were all in different cities, different areas. They all drove to Waco. I went to Baylor, so I was in Waco, Texas. They all drove to Waco that night just to be with me, just to
Wow.
spend the night with me. There was probably 8 or 9 girls at my house. And like some of my roommates, they were like, wow, I don't know that I have, a strong group of friends like this that would be willing to just drop what they were doing, like whether that be a test the next day at their college. I had one friend, I called her and she was like, I'm getting in my car right now, like no questions. Um, so I think my sense of community was the same in both, and they really got me through both of them.
Yeah, and I think that's important because we talk a lot about on this show about our circle of five, right? The people that surround you and who are influencing you the most. And you had mentioned way back at the beginning that after your car crash, you had to look at who are your friends, who are the people around you, and made adjustments. So I think that's a great point for people is community is our strength. And
Yeah.
sometimes when we're hit with tragedy, we want to isolate and we want to just try to deal with it all on our own. And the reality is that community is your strength and it pulls out the best in you. It reminds you of what you're possible of and what you're capable of. And that's amazing. I'm just thinking like how emotional and how even while it's a tough moment, just like you said, your friends were like, well, I don't know that I would have friends to do this. How just reassuring it was to know they're there for you no matter what.
Yeah, for sure. They got me through it, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. To echo what Jared said, I think the community piece is so important, and that is a big indicator of the impact that you had in their lives, in everyone's lives. You know, even in my life, I really another memory too is I remember when we had a speaker come and talk about the Columbine shooting at our high school. And you know, we're in high school. You're 16, 17 years old, and me now I've been training public speaking. I've been involved in Toastmasters, and still to this day, I get some nerves speaking, right? So I remember that after the Columbine speaker that you went up and you shared with the entire Churchill High School community your story, and it wasn't that long after the accident. And I just remember admiring you so much and being so inspired that you were able to get up there, and you did a fantastic job of sharing your story and being so vulnerable. And I think, you know, you impacted me, and I'm sure so many others that you probably don't even know you impacted just by showing up and owning your story. So I think that, you know, your friends that all drove from Waco to be with you is probably just a small piece of how you have positively impacted people in the world, because that says a lot. So awesome job on that.
Oh, thank you. It's actually funny because that was, I think it was about a year out of my accident, that first public speaking at Churchill. Um, and I did one last year at Churchill, and which is, I think it was 10 or 11 years later. And like my content was very different, I think, because I've had time to like reflect and grow. And like and my perception has changed a lot, like in a better way. Being able to like, I think being married, you think about having kids. So like thinking my perception has switched more to like how my mother saw things.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've definitely like grown in the content that I share and in the message that I share, being 10 years out.
I can only imagine. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
And for those of us that aren't from Texas, we know everything's bigger in the great state of Texas. How big is Churchill High School? Because that it's not like you're doing this talk to a class of 12 kids.
No, I think we had, I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Ollie, I feel like we had like 900 people in our graduating class.
Yeah.
Or when we started, and then like when we graduated, I think it was around 700. So, whether people don't make it through high school or they graduate early, or, they move.
Yeah, I believe our
Sounds about
graduating
right.
class was the high 700. So it was definitely one of the bigger schools, 5A school, really big school for San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah, so that's a big audience to get up and speak in front of and handle all those nerves and share your story. So we do have some younger listeners that follow us on social media and that are part of our community that are still at that age where this incident happened for you, Lainy. That 16 in high school. If they couldn't, if they'll never be at Churchill to hear your speech, so what would you tell those younger listeners that are part of our community, like one or two things that you learned from that moment?
My mom would always tell me growing up, nothing good happens after midnight. And I definitely believe that now, because my accident happened at 1 a.m. It was after midnight. But I think my biggest thing is like, I get it. Like, you might be around partying and drinking and driving, but do your best to try to be smart about it. Like, don't be ashamed to call your parents, or like, they have options now that we did not have. Like, they have Uber, they have what's the other one, Lyft. And like, we didn't have those options at all when we were in high school. So like, if you find yourself in a situation like at a party hammered, like don't get behind the wheel. Don't even get behind, in the car with a friend who's been drinking either. Just be like, hey, I'm gonna call us an Uber. And I always say, I think if I could have gone back, I would have just, called my mom or dad and been like, hey, like, I think you need to come pick me up. And just, yeah, they wouldn't have been happy about it, but like, that's, a week or two of grounding,
Right.
compared to, a whole life change of what I had to go through. So I think that is definitely my biggest message to high schoolers that find themselves in those situations.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
And then go ahead, Jared.
No, go ahead, Ollie. I appreciate that, because we do have a group of younger listeners that follow us, and I want to make sure they understand, like, part of when people share their stories with you, your responsibility and a listener is to apply it and to take something away from it. So I appreciate you giving those tips for them.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, those are great, Lainy. And then what about a couple key takeaways for our adult listeners who may be dealing with some trauma, some heavy adversity in their life, potentially a death in the family? What are some key takeaways that really helped you take your life to the next steps that you would want our listeners to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think for me, don't be afraid to talk about it. Like if you don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, I think it's a powerful thing to be able to go, whether that be a therapist or a friend that's close, and being able to talk about it. Um, that was a huge one for me that I really struggled with. Um, I think setting yourself up for like little goals was a big one too. So like it's good to have like a long-term big goal in mind. Like for me, that was, getting my master's degree, but definitely have those stepping stones along the way so you can, celebrate and all those moments of just victories. That was a huge one for me, overcoming my accident. And even after my dad, because I think initially I was like, my mom said I was like, no, I need to drop out of college and come be here with you and take care of you. And she was like, absolutely not. Like your dad will want you to finish. So being able to have someone kind of give you this perspectives, like, what would they want? Or they
Sure.
wouldn't want you to stop your life just because, because of this. So having those reminders too from the people you love is powerful.
That's good. And I love the service aspect of all of your stories. Like everything you've shared today, you're giving back in some way. And I will just share personally with you, speech pathology has reshaped our family's lives because my son was born with a speech disability. And if we weren't fortunate to live in a place that had great speech pathologists that kind of like you, they really bonded with the kids and they shared funny stories. I don't know that he would have gotten where he's gotten in life. And now if you talk to him, Ali, you can attest to this, you'd have no idea that he was nonverbal for 3 years in his life.
Oh, I love that. Thank you
So
for sharing that.
I thank you for doing that. And I know sometimes when we go through our days, it's because we're so close to whatever's happening, it's hard to see the impact until we stop and we look back. And
Exactly.
and
Yeah, there's times at work that I'm like, is this making a difference? Like, and then you have someone else from an outside perspective, like a parent or something, be like, hey, do you remember when they couldn't, say this? And like now look at them now, like they won't be quiet or something. I'm like, oh, you're right. Like if you go back and look, but sometimes when you're doing it like on a day-to-day basis, it is hard to see, those little victories that you're gaining.
yeah, but I think it's awesome. And I don't know what the title of your book's going to be, but I just love the fact that you're using your story to help other people tell their story, right? As a speech pathologist, you're literally giving them their voice back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my goal with it. I always say this, but just I lost the ability to lose my legs or to use my legs, but I didn't lose the ability to use my voice and be heard.
No,
So whether that be through writing or through speaking, like I want to use it to inspire others.
I love it.
Definitely. Well, I know you're going to be an inspiration to a lot of our listeners, and we're really grateful that you came on here and shared your story with us and trusted us to help you share your story. And we're honored to do it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Where can our listeners connect with you, social media wise? Where do you like to direct them?
Definitely Instagram. I'm a big Instagram person. So it's at Lainy Lainy Loyola Loyola.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on our show, Lainy. It was an honor to meet you and to get to talk with you. And I'm excited to see where your story leads other people's stories. So keep sharing, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Lainy.
All right, team, as we wrap up another episode of the On Purpose podcast, we are thankful for having you all on our journey. We want to announce new ways to include you and let you go deeper into our community. First off, we got the onpurposepodcast.com website where you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter, get inside tips, and see what's coming up in the upcoming months. as well as our new launch is our Patreon account. We have 5 tiers where you can decide at what level you want to contribute to the podcast and the community, help support us, continue to push us forward and grow. And it's as little as 50 cents an episode or $2 a month, all the way up to $50 a month, depending on where you want to be. Perks of this are sneak peek episodes. You get the episodes quicker. You get to contribute on episodes. You get monthly Q&As with Ali and I and special guests. And you get to be a building block for our community as we continue to grow worldwide. With the release of Shelly Davies' episode, we are now international. And we're excited for the future leads us. So please fit in with us wherever you are comfortable. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We'll see you next week.